During the last 2 days, we've been discussing the 9 ways or 9 factors for the sharpening and strengthening of 5 controlling faculties. We touched only on the first of these factors, namely, seeing only the dissolution or destruction of arisen formations. In Bali, Upanupanam Sankharanam Kayameva Pasadi, seeing only the destruction of arisen formations. Things are dissolving every second, every moment. All these conditioned things are subject to this phenomena. But when you say seeing only the dissolution or destruction of formations, the dissolution occurs only after it has arisen. First it must arise, then dissolves. It will not dissolve without arising. So it is not easy for the beginning yogis, for the beginners, to just look for the dissolution. Otherwise, it will amount to distraction of mind, wandering, thoughts, and restlessness, because one is looking only for the dissolution aspect. So, in real sense, for the beginners, it is not possible to find the dissolution part. Now some yogis are practicing the Satipatthana Bhavana. Some teachers might have instructed the yogis to look for the beginning, middle and the end of each object. And Sayadaw says it is not correct. It has not been given in any literature or any valid literature that one should look for the beginning, middle and the end of every arising object. This is not in accordance with the text, nor in accordance with the natural phenomena. And Sayadaw says he does not know where it has started. So some yogis have been interviewed, and they are reporting, some are reporting, that when they note rising, they find only the middle and the end, or only the middle and the end part of rising is evident. So it is not necessary to do that. Of course, every arising object, every object has its beginning, middle and the end. This is time factor, not atapachaka, not to be directly experienced, and they are not paramattha, not the real entity, not the ultimate reality. In literary language, this is kala paññati, the concept of time. And this is not the real paramattha, not the real ultimate reality. Not to be, one will not find the ultimate reality by doing so. So what is the paramattha? The ultimate realities are things which arise in the body. Every time you see, hear, taste, smell, touch, think. Every time you bend or stretch. Every time you rise or fall. Every time you live, move or place. In every activity, every manner, there are these ultimate realities, ultimate things. They are known as nama-rupa paramattas. They are subject to cause and condition. So in the beginning, the yogis note these objects by naming them with common usage. Just call it in a common way. One should not choose paramattha. One should not choose which is ultimate and which is not ultimate. In another sense, the objects which are to be noted are these mind-body objects, materiality, mentality, mind, nama, rupa, and one has got to note in order to observe these mentality, materiality, or mind-body phenomena, psychophysical phenomena. So the yogis are to grasp these things. Let us say when the yogi is watching the abdomen and noting rising and falling. Of course, rising and falling means just naming, namesake. In fact, when rising takes place, there occurs stiffness, tension, movement. These are the ultimate realities, the sensation, stiffness, tension and movement. And when falling takes place, you watch the falling, you follow the falling, you will observe movement, relaxation, and so on. So these are sabhava dhammas, the natural characteristics, natural things, or individual essences. And they occur in rising and falling, during rising and falling. So when you follow these rising and falling, you will observe these individual qualities, sabhava dhammas. One cannot choose that, which is stiffness, which is tension, and so on. At times in the body also, there may occur some sensations such as heat, cold, and all these things, stiffness, tension, or numbness, and so on. These things you note by calling them, by naming them, using common language, common usage, as heat, or cold, or stiffness, or numbness, and so on. So when you're noting rising, you're not looking for the beginning, middle, and the end. You're not to do that. When you're noting falling also, you're not to look for beginning, middle, and the end. They are not the objects to be noted. Same thing goes with other objects that arise in the body. So in the body are these mind-body objects, mentality, materiality, nama, rupa, psychophysical phenomena. And it is said that the first factor is seeing the dissolution of these psychophysical phenomena, formations. If you look for just dissolution, your mind may be distracted, you may become restless, and you will be thinking about how to observe them. So you cannot do that. You will only find or observe the dissolution clearly when you come to the stage of insight knowledge known as Vanga Jnana, knowledge of dissolution or destruction. Then you will see the dissolution part clearly. But first of all, you got to note only whatever arises in your body. Now at this point, there are three characteristics, namely sabhava lakkhana, natural, individual or specific characteristic. Secondly, sankata lakkhana, the characteristic of time factor. Then sabha saminya lakkhana, the universal or common characteristic. Just like in the food that you take, there are these flavors, tastes, individual flavor, specific taste, specific flavor. So too, these namarupa objects have their own essences, essential qualities, specific qualities, individual qualities. For instance, in Patavi, earth element of earth, it is manifested as hardness, softness, harshness, and so on. In Abodhadu, the element of water, we have this wetness, cohesion, solidity. And Tejo Dhatu, the element of temperature, it is manifested as heat, cold, lightness, and so on. In Vayo Dhatu, the element of wind, it is manifested as stiffness, tension, movement. So these are the individual characteristics like flavors in the food that you take. In the mind also, the mind also has its own characteristic, natural characteristic. That is, it has the characteristic of knowing when you see, hear, taste, touch, and so on. And then the mental states, chilsikas, which color your consciousness, such as contact and sensations, feeling, and so on. So we have these sabhava lekanas, natural characteristics. It arises, it ages and passes away. In Suttanta, in the discourses, by the method of discourses, one can say the beginning, the middle, and the end. But in Abhidhamma wise, we say Upada, that is genesis, Titi, aging, and Vanga, dissolution or destruction. So this is time factor only. This is not sabhava. This is not the natural characteristic to be looked for. However, when you're noting the objects, when you're noting sabhava lekanas, these things, this time factor, will also be observed, will also be seen automatically. And this time factor is known as Sankata Lekana. So they happen. Every condition, psychophysical phenomena that arise and pass away has this time factor. Now this Saminya Lekana, universal or common characteristics, is common to all psychophysical phenomena, nama rupa. Everything, every time it arises, it will dissolve. It will not be stable for even a moment. It will only pass away or vanishes. When you note at the moment of seeing, hearing, and tasting, touching, you will see the objects arising and passing away. Because they are common to all objects, it is known as universal or common characteristic. In Pali, Saminya Lekana. Now the dissolution, the nature of dissolution, it cannot be satisfactory. So it comes under Dukkha Lekana, the characteristic of suffering or unsatisfactoriness. So this every object is subject to arising and passing away. And this arising and passing away is not created by any creator or supreme being. They occur by themselves. This is the inherent quality. They arise and pass away by themselves. It's not the work of anybody else, let alone the supreme being. Like weather conditions. The weather can be cold or hot. There's nothing you can do about it. This is not created by the supreme being, but they occur by themselves, on their own. There is no such thing as atta, self or soul. This is anatta, non-self, non-soul. They arise on their own. They are uncontrollable, unmanageable. Every psychophysical phenomenon, mind, body, has this characteristic, namely Saminya Lekana, common or universal characteristic. Out of these three characteristics, lekanas, sabhava lekana, the individual essences and characteristic, is most important. Once you observe this sabhava lekana, natural characteristic, natural things, you will see the sankata lekana automatically. You don't have to look for it purposely. Only try and observe this sabhava, then you will see automatically while you are observing sabhava, these beginning, middle and the end, which are known as kala paññatti. They are not to be looked for. They are not to be looked for as an object, but automatically they will become evident. You are not to look for it purposely. If you are exerting energy to look for these three parts, beginning, middle and the end, you will be wasting time. This is very important. This sankata lakkhana, time factor, beginning, middle and the end, leads to samminya lakkhana, common or universal characteristic. But you are not to look for purposely what is anicca, what is dukkha, or what is anatta, through reflection. They will automatically be observed once you note sabhava lakkhana. At this point, there is this fixed law, niyama, in the field of satipatthana, which says, only when you see sabhava, you will see sankata. Only when you see sankata, you will see samminya. Only when you observe samminya, you will cultivate insight, vipassana, and once you gain maturity, you become matured in the practice of insight, you will realize path and fruition knowledge of the Noble Ones, Ariya, Megaphala, Jnana, and which will lead to seeing Nibbana. Only when you see Nibbana, you will be free from the apaya, the suffering of lower states. So this is very important for the yogis. We said that the sabhava lakkhana leads to sankata lakkhana. From sankata lakkhana, we come to samminya lakkhana. That is from natural characteristic to time characteristic or mode characteristic, and from the time or mode characteristic to universal or common characteristic. Now, when we say sabha, look for sabhava lakkhana, how to look for sabhava lakkhana? How to observe it? There's this saying, only when you are with the moment, you will see sabhava. That means only when you note at the very moment of arising, will you observe that natural characteristic, as is given in the discourse method, in the discourses. And you note by naming with your own language, common language, whenever you see, hear, taste, touch, at the moment of hearing, at the moment of seeing, tasting, touching, at the moment of rising and falling, at the moment of bending and stretching, lifting, moving, placing, you note them by naming with your common usage, using your common usage. For the beginning yogis, it will not be easy for them to just see sabhava and sabhava alone, exclusively, not easy. They will be also seeing forms and manners. Form of the abdomen, for instance, when you're noting abdomen, watching abdomen, they may see the form of the abdomen, the form of rising, or the manner of rising, together with the natural characteristics, together with the sensations. They all be mixed. Let them be observed. Never mind. You don't have to worry about it, because throughout your life you have been wrestling with these forms and manners. So there's nothing you can do about it. If you note in the beginning, rising and falling, you will also observe form and manner as well. So that you cannot see just sabhava and sabhava alone. But you note the arising object using common language. This is for the beginning yogis. But when the rising takes place, note as rising. When falling takes place, note as falling. So, this is how one has got to note. Because it is given that when you walk, just note as walking. Kishandova, Kisamiti, Pajanati. That is given in the discourses. That is, when you're going or walking, note as, or try to become aware, or try to know as walking or going. If you're moving forward, just know that you are moving forward. If you are moving backward, know as moving backward. If you are bending or stretching, know means note and know as bending and stretching, using the common language, such as bending, stretching, or moving, lifting, moving, placing, and so on. So, this is how you observe. Now you are watching abdomen in this practice, and note rising and falling. In common language, Vohara, as rising and falling. In your own language, as the saying goes, only when you are with the moment, you will see sabhava, but you got to pay attention, fixed attention, with the application of two mental powers, namely aiming. Aiming is the jhanic factor of jhana. And then the driving force, which is the energy that you apply, in order that your noting mind will reach or will come on to the object as though it is touching or rubbing on the object, as though your noting mind is touching or rubbing on the object, so that your noting mind is sustained on the object. So you do that with fixed attention, and you apply these two mental powers, so that the noting mind will be sustained on the object. So this will happen, as the saying goes, only when you're with a moment, you will see sabhava, but you got to practice. Go on practicing, but if you go on practicing, you are bound to become skillful in the practice, in noting the rising and falling. So whatever arises in the body will be noted using the common language. But in noting that, you got to do it with full force, so that your noting mind will be sustained on the object in full force. And the teachers always exhort you to note as soon as the object arises. You try to note from the beginning to the end. That is, the instruction is given so that you become very attentive, meticulous. You will use real energy not to miss the object. That's why the teachers give instructions, exhort you to note as soon as it arises until it finishes. And also the teachers give this instruction so that the yogis will be very careful, meticulous in their practice. So however much the teachers may exhort, or however much the yogis may exert, they are not to look for the beginning, the middle and the end. But of course, after 1 or 2 days of practice, they may observe them automatically. When the noting mind is very strong, they may observe the middle part of the object. They are bound to observe the middle part of the object when their practice becomes very strong. So, whatever arises, the objects have these 3 parts, but you don't have to look for which is beginning, which is middle and end, but you just know the objects as such with full force. So in fact, you will not be knowing this beginning, middle and end. You are not noting these beginning, middle and end. You are noting only the objects. These beginning, middle and end are not the objects of attention, not the objects to be noted. The objects to be noted the object of attention are rising, falling, or any other objects that arise in the body. So as the saying goes, be with the moment, you note rising as it rises, you are bound to observe these sensations, these natural qualities, such as stiffness, tension, movement, which are the manifestations of the element of wind, Vaya Dhatu. They are sabhava lakhanas. And then, knowing these materialities, namely stiffness, tension, movement, sabhava lakhanas, knowing them is nama, mentality. This is the natural characteristic of mentality. That is knowing the objects. Like when you take food, when you chew them, when you chew the items of food, you are bound to taste the flavor of the food, such as sweetness, sourness, saltiness, and so on. So that when you are with the moment, you see sabhava, that is in accordance with the fixed law. Yogis are to note every arising object all the time without any gap. That is, in noting the object, you got to note with full force as the object arises, and then follow it closely. The noting mind should follow the objects very closely. When rising takes place, the noting mind should follow closely. When falling takes place, every arising object should be followed closely with the application of two mental factors, namely aiming and energy, the driving force. One should not note without the application of aiming power. One should not note without the application of energy. One should not note lightly. And one should not note the object with the noting mind removed from the object, away from the object. One should not also lose sight of the object. So when you are reporting at interviews, the teachers will ask whether you are noting rising and falling by aiming and closely following the objects. So first of all, they will ask you about the work, that is, whether you note or not. Then you have to speak out thoroughly, whether you do it or not. Secondly, they will ask you whether the quality of practice, namely, when you are noting rising and falling or other objects, are you doing it thoroughly, carefully? Of course, most of the, or maybe all of the yogis will say yes. They won't say no. If they are asked to do it properly, they will say yes. They won't say no. And now if they note properly, what do they know? Then it becomes very difficult. Because you have to report what you know. If you are following the objects closely and meticulously, what do you know of it? You got to speak out fully. What did you see? What did you observe? What did you know? Are you observing only the abdomen, the form of the abdomen, because your mind is on the abdomen? Or are you observing only the manner of rising and falling? Or are you able to note stiffness, tension, movement, the sabhavas? Of course, when you are reporting, you report from your own experience, not from hearsay, not from thoughts or imaginations or conceptual knowledge. Because the teachers know as soon as the words come out of your mouth, whether you are speaking from your own observation or from imagination. So you speak out from your own practical experience, what you observe. Because the conceptual knowledge, instead of intuitive knowledge, conceptual knowledge is not legal. is not to be considered as legal. So if you note, what do you know of it? You have to speak out fully what you observe, and you just speak out whatever you observe. There may be many things that you observe in the practice of meditation. Then if you are not able to note what happens, that will be the next question. Has the mind wandered? Are you thinking about something, thinking about home? Thinking about something else? If you are thinking, if the thoughts are away, are you noting as thinking, and bring it back, bring your observation to your abdomen? Or has your mind been directed or attracted to another object? For instance, some unbearable pain in the body that arises, then your mind may be attracted towards that, attention may be placed towards that object. Then what happens? And if there is pain, what is the mental reaction to that? That also has to be reported. And when the observation, when the pain or some physical object arises, for instance, there is itchiness or some numbness, what happens to it? Does it increase? Or does it stop? Or does it mutate? And so on. Because in accordance with this expression, Anapana, you got to note it repeatedly, with repeated contemplation. So, does the physical object increases, or diminishes, or disappears? And what is the mental reaction to that? All these things are to be reported, and this is the responsibility of the yogi. So if you do that with every arising object, as you go on doing it with the practice, you are bound to observe finally the sabhava lakkhana, not from imagination or hearsay, but from your own experience, leading to the conditionality, the condition, the cause and condition of the object, and the universal characteristics such as impermanence and so on. Such is the practice of Vipassana. It's 1 hour up. We shall continue tomorrow. Sa